I never expected my own sister to use children as weapons against me, but that's exactly what Stephanie did when she dumped her 3 kids at what she thought was my apartment while I was at work. The problem I had moved out 2 weeks earlier and never told her. The new tenant who answered the door that Tuesday afternoon wasn't just anyone. She was Detective Maria Santos from Child Protective Services. One phone call from Maria would unravel 15 years of Stephanie's lies and change our entire family forever. 3 weeks before everything exploded, I should have seen the warning signs during Mom's 60th birthday celebration. The entire family had gathered at our childhood home in suburban Phoenix, the same cramped ranch house where Stephanie and I had grown up, sharing a bedroom until I turned 18 and couldn't wait to escape. My younger sister Stephanie breezed through the front door 20 minutes late as usual with her 3 children trailing behind her like lost ducklings. 8-year-old Tyler clutched a worn backpack that looked like it hadn't been washed in months. 6-year-old Emma's ponytail hung crooked, secured with a rubber band instead of a proper hair tie. 4-year-old Lucas sucked his thumb while dragging a stuffed elephant, missing one ear across the hardwood floor. "Sorry we're late," Stephanie announced, not sounding sorry at all as she tossed her designer purse onto Mom's antique coffee table. Traffic was absolutely insane on the interstate. I knew better. Stephanie lived 15 minutes away in a trendy apartment complex that she could barely afford. She was late because she always was, because punctuality required consideration for other people, and Stephanie had never mastered that particular skill. Our mother, Patricia, immediately swept the children into her arms, cooing over them, while Dad Robert retreated to his recliner with a beer and the television remote. This dynamic had played out countless times over the past 8 years since Tyler was born. Stephanie would arrive with minimal supervision over her kids, Patricia would take over their care, and Dad would disappear into whatever sporting event happened to be broadcasting. The birthday dinner proceeded normally until dessert when Stephanie cleared her throat and made her announcement. "I have incredible news," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that always made my stomach clench with dread. Derek surprised me with a Mediterranean cruise for next week, 7 whole days of pure paradise. Derek was boyfriend number 3 this year, a personal trainer with more muscles than brains, who'd been dating Stephanie for exactly 6 weeks. I had met him once when he picked her up from Mom's house, and he had spent the entire 5-minute conversation flexing his biceps and talking about protein supplements. "That sounds wonderful, honey," Mom said, already calculating in her head how this would affect the family schedule. "The only tiny problem," Stephanie continued, her eyes settling on me with laser focus, "is that Derek booked it for next Tuesday through the following Tuesday, spring break week for the kids, so I'll need someone to watch Tyler, Emma, and Lucas while we're gone." The word "someone" hung in the air, but everyone at the table understood she meant me. This was how Stephanie operated. She never asked directly, never gave people the opportunity to refuse. She simply announced her plans and expected the world to rearrange itself around her desires. "I can't do it," I said firmly, setting down my fork. "I just started a new position at TechFlow Solutions last month. I'm the marketing coordinator for their software launch, and next week is absolutely critical. We have client presentations every single day." Stephanie's perfectly made-up face shifted from confident expectation to shocked indignation. "What do you mean you can't? They're family, Christiana. Family comes first." "Family does come first," I agreed. "But that doesn't mean I can drop everything whenever you decide to take a spontaneous vacation with someone you've been dating for 6 weeks." The temperature in the dining room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tyler, Emma, and Lucas continued eating their cake, oblivious to the adult tension building around them. But I could see Mom and Dad exchanging the look they always shared when Stephanie didn't get her way. "This isn't spontaneous." Stephanie snapped, her voice rising. "Derek planned this weeks ago. It's not my fault you're too selfish to help your own family." "Stephanie," Dad said quietly, "maybe we can figure something else out." "Like what?" she demanded, turning her fury on him. "Mom has her book club commitments and you have that conference in Denver. Christiana is the only logical option." I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next would determine whether this conversation ended in compromise or complete warfare. I'm not saying I don't want to help. I'm saying I literally cannot take a full week off work during our busiest period. If you had asked me a month ago, maybe we could have worked something out. But you can't just assume I'll be available. So you're telling me, Stephanie said, her voice dripping with the kind of wounded martyrdom she had perfected in high school, that your precious job is more important than these innocent children who need care. Mom leaned forward, her maternal instincts kicking into full gear. Christiana, sweetheart, surely your boss would understand if you explained the situation. Family emergencies happen. This isn't a family emergency, I replied, feeling increasingly cornered. This is Stephanie deciding to go on vacation without arranging proper childcare first. Proper childcare. Stephanie's voice climbed another octave. I'm asking their aunt to watch them, not some random stranger off the internet. God, when did you become so cold and heartless? The accusation hit exactly where she intended it to. Stephanie had always been gifted at finding people's emotional pressure points and pressing them until they gave her what she wanted. Throughout our childhood, she had manipulated our parents with tears, tantrums, and claims of being misunderstood. As adults, she had simply refined the technique. I'm not heartless, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I love Tyler, Emma, and Lucas, but I also have responsibilities that I can't just abandon. Right, Stephanie said, standing up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Your responsibilities to some company that would replace you in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, your actual family means nothing to you. Tyler looked up from his cake chocolate frosting smeared around his mouth. Mommy, why are you yelling? I'm not yelling, baby, Stephanie said immediately, switching to her sweet mother voice. Aunt Christiana is just being difficult about helping us when we need her. The manipulation was so blatant that it took my breath away. She was using her own children as weapons, making them witnesses to a conflict she had created and placing me in the position of the villain in their eyes. I need some air, I said, pushing back from the table. Of course you do, Stephanie called after me as I headed for the back porch. Run away when things get uncomfortable. That's always been your solution. I stepped outside into the cool March evening, my hands shaking with anger and frustration. Through the sliding glass door, I could hear Mom trying to smooth things over, suggesting alternative arrangements that we all knew wouldn't work. Dad remained silent, as he always did when family conflicts arose. He had perfected the art of avoiding confrontation by simply pretending it wasn't happening. 20 minutes later, Stephanie stormed out of the house with her children in tow, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. She loaded Tyler, Emma, and Lucas into her silver Honda Civic without looking back, gunning the engine as she reversed out of the driveway. My phone buzzed with a text message before her taillights had even disappeared around the corner. I hope your job keeps you warm at night when you have no family left who cares about you. That was followed by another message 10 minutes later. I'm going on this cruise whether you help or not. Someone better figure out childcare for those kids, because I'm done being the only one who sacrifices for this family. And then at 11:30 that night, the message that should have been a bigger red flag than it was, I know where you live. You'll watch them whether you want to or not. I stared at that last text for a long time, sitting in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex. Stephanie had always been dramatic, always prone to threats she never followed through on. But something about the coldness of that message, the calculated certainty of it, made my skin crawl. I had no way of knowing that in exactly 17 days that text would become the key piece of evidence in a Child Protective Services investigation that would change all of our lives forever. The morning after Mom's birthday disaster, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the leftover cake I had eaten for breakfast. Stephanie's threat kept echoing in my mind. I know where you live. The words felt less like sibling drama and more like a genuine warning. I had been living in the same garden-style apartment complex in Tempe for 3 years, a modest but comfortable one-bedroom unit that fit my budget as a marketing assistant. The Saguaro Springs complex wasn't fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and close enough to downtown Phoenix that my commute was manageable. Most importantly, it had been my sanctuary, the first place that felt truly mine after years of shared dorm rooms and cramped apartments with roommates. But now the idea of Stephanie knowing exactly where to find me felt suffocating. I could picture her showing up unannounced using her key hiding skills from our childhood to break in, or worse, just leaving Tyler, Emma, and Lucas on my doorstep with a note and disappearing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed space, physical distance that would give me time to think without constantly looking over my shoulder. That Saturday, instead of doing laundry and meal prep like usual, I found myself driving through neighborhoods I had never explored, looking at apartment complexes with available units. It felt impulsive and slightly crazy, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my own life instead of just reacting to Stephanie's chaos. Maplewood Heights caught my attention immediately. The complex sat 15 miles northwest of my current place, nestled in a quiet residential area, surrounded by mature oak trees and well-maintained sidewalks. The units were slightly more expensive than what I was paying, but my new job at TechFlow Solutions came with a significant salary increase that made the upgrade possible. The leasing office was busy with weekend apartment hunters, families with children examining floor plans, and young professionals comparing amenities. The property manager, Janet, was a cheerful woman in her 50s who walked me through a ground floor unit that took my breath away. "This one just became available yesterday," she explained as she unlocked the door. "The previous tenant was transferred to our sister property across town." The apartment was everything mine wasn't spacious, bright, and modern. The kitchen featured granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, while the living room had sliding glass doors that opened onto a small patio overlooking a courtyard with a fountain. The bedroom was large enough for a king-size bed and a proper desk, and the bathroom had both a shower and a soaking tub. "What's the neighborhood like?" I asked, already knowing I wanted to say yes. "Very quiet," Janet replied. "We get a lot of working professionals, some retirees, a few families with school-age children. Most people keep to themselves, but it's the kind of place where neighbors look out for each other. We've never had any serious problems with noise complaints or disturbances." I filled out the application that afternoon and was approved by Monday morning. The previous tenant had left behind some furniture that I was welcome to purchase, including a beautiful leather sofa and a dining room set that would have cost me months of savings to buy new. By Wednesday, I had given notice to my old complex and arranged for movers to transfer my belongings the following weekend. The entire process felt surreal, like I was watching someone else make these major life decisions. But every time I hesitated, I remembered Stephanie's text message and felt a surge of determination. I was 28 years old, financially stable, and tired of making my choices based on other people's potential reactions. I told exactly 3 people about my move: my best friend Ashley, my supervisor at work for address change purposes, and Janet at Maplewood Heights. Everyone else, including my parents and especially Stephanie, would find out when I was ready to tell them if I ever was. The week between signing the lease and moving was tense in ways I hadn't expected. Stephanie sent a series of text messages that started apologetic and gradually became more demanding. The first one arrived Tuesday morning. "I'm sorry I lost my temper at Mom's. This cruise means a lot to Derek and me, and I'm stressed about the logistics." By Thursday, the tone had shifted. "I've been thinking about childcare options, and you're still the best choice. The kids love you and they're comfortable with your apartment." Friday brought escalation. "Derek already bought the cruise tickets. They're non-refundable. I need a commitment from you by Sunday night, or I'll have to make other arrangements." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on packing my belongings and preparing for the move. Ashley came over Saturday night to help me wrap dishes and pack books, bringing pizza and a bottle of wine as fuel for the work. "Are you sure you don't want to tell your parents about this?" she asked as we sealed another box of kitchen supplies. "They're going to find out eventually." "Eventually isn't now," I said, wrapping my coffee maker in newspaper. "I need some time to settle in and figure out how to handle the Stephanie situation without Mom and Dad trying to guilt me into giving in. What if she shows up at your old place looking for you? I had thought about that possibility extensively. The new tenant is moving in Monday. If Stephanie comes by after that, she'll figure out I'm gone. Maybe it'll give her the wake-up call she needs about assuming she can control other people's lives. Ashley looked skeptical, but didn't push the issue. She knew enough about my family dynamics to understand why I needed distance, even if she thought I was handling it in a more dramatic way than necessary. Sunday arrived with another text from Stephanie. "This is your last chance, Christiana. I leave for the cruise Tuesday morning. If you don't commit to watching the kids today, I'm making other arrangements, and you'll have to live with the consequences." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Then I turned off my phone and spent the day moving my life to a place where my sister couldn't find me. The apartment at Maplewood Heights felt like a different world. My belongings looked smaller and more elegant in the larger space, and the view from my new living room window showed a peaceful courtyard where elderly residents sat reading newspapers and young families pushed strollers along winding pathways. As I unpacked my clothes in the spacious bedroom closet, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since childhood, Stephanie couldn't just show up at my door whenever she felt like making demands. She couldn't drive by to check if I was home or leave guilt-inducing notes on my windshield. I had bought myself the most precious thing imaginable: privacy. That night, I fell asleep in my new bedroom listening to the gentle sound of the courtyard fountain instead of traffic from the busy street outside my old apartment. I had no idea that Detective Maria Santos, the previous tenant, had been called away on an emergency family matter that prevented her from updating her address with several official databases. I also had no idea that Stephanie had already booked her crew's already researched taxi companies that would transport unaccompanied minors to specific addresses and already written a note explaining that family emergencies sometimes required flexible arrangements. While I slept peacefully in my new sanctuary, my sister was putting the finishing touches on a plan that would backfire in ways she never could have imagined. Tuesday morning started as the best day I had experienced in months. My alarm went off at 6:30, and instead of the usual dread that accompanied weekdays, I felt energized and optimistic. The coffee tasted better when brewed in my new kitchen, and the drive to work through unfamiliar neighborhoods felt like an adventure rather than a chore. TechFlow Solutions occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office building in downtown Phoenix, and my cubicle on the 14th floor offered a view of the desert mountains that stretched beyond the city limits. As the marketing coordinator for their new project management software launch, I was responsible for coordinating client presentations, managing social media campaigns, and liaising between the sales team and our graphic design contractors. The job was challenging in the best possible way. Unlike my previous position at a struggling nonprofit where I had worn 12 different hats and received minimal support, TechFlow provided clear expectations, adequate resources, and colleagues who treated me like a valued team member rather than an overworked assistant. "Morning, Christiana," called David, our lead software developer, as he passed my cubicle with a steaming mug of coffee. "Ready for the Patterson Industries presentation?" "Absolutely," I replied, pulling up my notes on the computer screen. I finished the revised proposal last night, and the marketing materials look fantastic. The Patterson Industries meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock, and it represented our biggest potential client acquisition of the quarter. If we landed their contract, it would validate months of product development and position our software as a serious competitor in the project management market. I spent the first hour of my workday reviewing presentation slides, confirming that our conference room technology was functioning properly, and rehearsing key talking points with Sandra, our sales director. Everything felt perfectly organized and under control. At 9:15, my phone started buzzing with calls from an unknown number with a local area code. I let the first call go to voicemail, assuming it was a telemarketer or wrong number. When the same number called again 5 minutes later, I answered. "Hello, this is Christiana." "Yes, hi, this is dispatch from Desert Express Taxi. We have a delivery scheduled for 10 o'clock this morning to your address on Maple Creek Drive, but our driver is having trouble locating the specific apartment number. Could you confirm the unit number?" I felt a chill run down my spine. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number. I don't live on Maple Creek Drive, and I didn't request any taxi service. The customer information shows Christiana Walsh at 427 Maple Creek Drive, Unit 215. The delivery is prepaid for 3 passengers to be transported from Desert View Elementary School. My hands started shaking. 427 Maple Creek Drive, Unit 215 was my old address. Desert View Elementary was where Tyler, Emma, and Lucas attended school. There's been a mistake, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant. I moved out of that apartment 2 weeks ago. Someone else lives there now. Oh, the dispatcher sounded confused. The customer specifically requested delivery to that address. Should I call her to confirm? Who is the customer? Stephanie Walsh. She left detailed instructions about the delivery. I closed my eyes, feeling sick to my stomach. Yes, you should definitely call her. This entire arrangement is a mistake. I hung up and immediately called Ashley, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She was probably in court. She worked as a paralegal for a criminal defense firm and often had to turn off her phone during proceedings. My phone buzzed with another call from a different unknown number. This time, the caller ID showed Sunny Skies Cruise Line. This is Christiana. Ms. Walsh, this is Captain Rodriguez from the Sunny Skies cruise ship Mediterranean Princess. We received an emergency contact form listing you as the primary caregiver for 3 minor children, while Ms. Stephanie Walsh is aboard our vessel. We're calling to confirm that you've received the children safely. The conference room where I was supposed to be setting up for the Patterson Industries presentation felt like it was spinning around me. I haven't received any children, and I'm not the primary caregiver for anyone. Ma'am, this is very concerning. Ms. Walsh boarded our ship in Fort Lauderdale this morning, and according to her emergency contact information, her children were being delivered to your residence at 10 o'clock Pacific time. I looked at the clock on the conference room wall. It was 9:45. Captain Rodriguez, I need you to understand something very important. I did not agree to watch those children. My sister arranged this without my knowledge or consent, and she sent them to an address where I no longer live. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that I thought the call had been disconnected. Finally, Captain Rodriguez spoke again. Ms. Walsh, are you saying that 3 minor children are currently being delivered to an address where no one expects them? That's exactly what I'm saying. I need to contact the appropriate authorities immediately. Can you provide me with your current contact information and address? I gave him my new phone number and Maplewood Heights address, then hung up and called my old apartment complex. The leasing office manager, Brian, answered on the 3rd ring. Saguaro Springs Apartments, this is Brian. Brian, this is Christiana Walsh. I used to live in Unit 215. I moved out 2 weeks ago, and there should be a new tenant living there now. Right, Ms. Walsh. Your unit was rented to Maria Santos. She moved in last Monday. Is there a problem? There's going to be a huge problem in about 10 minutes. My sister just sent her 3 children to that address in a taxi, expecting me to be there to watch them. Maria Santos is about to have 3 scared kids delivered to her doorstep. Jesus Christ, Brian muttered. Okay, let me call Maria's unit and give her a heads up. Brian, you should probably also call the police. This is looking like child abandonment. I hung up and sank into one of the conference room chairs, my carefully planned presentation completely forgotten. Sandra appeared in the doorway looking concerned. Christiana, the Patterson Industries team just arrived. Are you okay? You look pale. Sandra, I have a family emergency that I need to handle immediately. I know this is terrible timing, but don't worry about it, she said immediately, switching into crisis management mode. David can handle the technical presentation, and I'll cover the marketing points. Take care of whatever you need to take care of. At exactly 10 o'clock, while I was gathering my purse and car keys, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Maria Santos. Hello. Is this Christiana Walsh? Yes. This is Detective Maria Santos with the Phoenix Police Department Child Protective Services Division. I'm currently at your former address where a taxi just delivered 3 children who were told their Aunt Christiana would be caring for them. We need to talk." I had never driven across Phoenix faster than I did that Tuesday morning, weaving through traffic, while my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Detective Santos had asked me to meet her at the Saguaro Springs apartment complex, and her tone suggested this was not a request I could decline. When I pulled into the familiar parking lot, I saw a police cruiser, an unmarked sedan, and a white van with Child Protective Services printed in blue letters along the side. A small crowd of residents had gathered near the main building, whispering among themselves and occasionally pointing toward my old apartment. Detective Maria Santos was not what I had expected. She was a petite Hispanic woman in her early 40s, wearing a navy blazer and practical flats with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her expression was serious but not unkind as she approached my car. "Ms. Walsh," she said as I got out. "I'm Detective Santos. Thank you for coming so quickly." "Where are the children?" I asked immediately. "Are they okay?" "They're safe. We have them in our family services van with a trained counselor while we sort this out. They're frightened and confused, but physically unharmed." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a surge of anger so intense that I had to take several deep breaths before I could speak. "I want to see them." "In a moment. First, I need to understand exactly what happened here, because what I'm seeing looks like child abandonment, and that's a felony in Arizona." Detective Santos led me to a shaded area near the apartment complex mailboxes, away from the curious residents, and close enough to the CPS van that I could see 3 small faces pressed against the tinted windows. "Tell me about your relationship with Stephanie Walsh," she said, pulling out a small notebook. For the next 20 minutes, I explained everything. The birthday party confrontation, Stephanie's manipulative text messages, my decision to move without telling my family, and the threatening message she had sent about knowing where I lived. Detective Santos took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed she understood family dynamics far better than I had expected. "Have there been other incidents where Ms. Walsh has left her children in inappropriate situations?" she asked. I hesitated, knowing that my answer would have serious consequences for my sister, but Tyler, Emma, and Lucas deserved better than protecting the adult who was supposed to care for them. "Yes," I said. "Many times. She drops them off with relatives without advance notice, leaves them alone when she goes out with boyfriends, and uses them as leverage to get what she wants from family members. My parents usually cover for her so nothing gets reported officially." "How often would you estimate this happens?" "At least once a month, sometimes more. Tyler has mentioned being responsible for his younger siblings when Stephanie goes out at night. He's 8 years old." Detective Santos looked up from her notebook, her expression grim. "Ms. Walsh, I need you to understand that what happened today is not just a family disagreement. Your sister sent 3 minor children to an address where she believed someone lived but made no effort to confirm that person would be available to receive them. If I hadn't been home on my day off, those children would have been abandoned on the doorstep of an empty apartment." The weight of that possibility hit me like a physical blow. Oh God, what if you hadn't been there? The taxi driver would have either taken them back to the school, in which case we'd be dealing with an abandonment charge, or left them in the parking lot, in which case we'd be dealing with something much worse. My phone buzzed with a text message. The number wasn't familiar, but when I opened it, I realized it was from Stephanie using the ship's communication system. "The kids better be with you right now, or there will be consequences when I get back." I showed the message to Detective Santos, who photographed it with her phone before adding it to her notes. "Has she attempted to contact you since the children were delivered?" "That's the first message, but she's been sending threatening texts for days." I scrolled through my phone, showing her the various demands and manipulative messages leading up to today's crisis. "I'm going to need copies of all of those," she said. "They establish a pattern of coercive behavior and help explain why you moved without giving her your new address." A second CPS van pulled into the parking lot, and a woman in a social worker's jacket got out carrying a large folder. Detective Santos waved her over. "This is Jennifer Murphy, our family crisis coordinator," she explained. "She's been interviewing Tyler, Emma, and Lucas to assess their emotional state and gather information about their home environment." Jennifer Murphy looked tired in the way that people in child protection services always seem to look, but her handshake was firm and her voice was warm when she spoke. "Ms. Walsh, I've been talking with your niece and nephews for the past hour. They're remarkable children, but they've shared some concerning information about their living situation." "What kind of information?" "Tyler told me that his mother goes away overnight lots of times and leaves him in charge of his siblings. Emma mentioned being hungry when there's no food in the house. Lucas has been asking repeatedly when someone is going to take him home, but when I ask him about home, he describes your apartment, the old one, rather than his mother's place." The pieces of Stephanie's neglect were falling into place in ways that made my chest ache. "They spend a lot of time with our parents and with me. Stephanie uses us as free babysitters whenever she wants to go out or travel." "How often do they stay with you specifically?" I thought about the past year, remembering weekend visits that stretched into entire week school pickup duties that Stephanie suddenly couldn't handle, and bedtime phone calls from Tyler asking when they could come stay with me again. "At least 2 weekends a month," I admitted. "Sometimes more. They have clothes and toys at my old place, because Stephanie drops them off so frequently." Jennifer and Detective Santos exchanged a look that I couldn't interpret, but it made my stomach clench with worry. "Ms. Walsh," Detective Santos said carefully, "we're going to need to conduct a full investigation into the children's living situation. That means interviewing your parents, examining Stephanie's apartment, and reviewing any previous reports or concerns about the children's welfare." "Previous reports? We ran a preliminary check on the family while you were driving over here. There have been 3 anonymous reports filed about the Walsh children in the past 2 years. Each time when we investigated, family members provided alternative explanations for the concerns, and no action was taken. I felt sick realizing that people had been worried enough about Tyler, Emma, and Lucas to call Child Protective Services. But my parents and I had unknowingly helped cover up the problem by providing the stability that should have been coming from their mother. What happens to the children while you investigate? That depends on several factors, Jennifer said. We need to determine whether there are suitable family members who can provide temporary care while we assess the situation. We also need to evaluate whether returning them to Ms. Walsh when she comes back from her cruise would be in their best interest. The van door opened and Tyler appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Aunt Christiana, the nice lady said you were here." I looked at Detective Santos, who nodded permission for me to approach the van. Tyler launched himself into my arms, followed quickly by Emma and Lucas, who clung to my legs like I was a life raft in a storm. "We thought you moved away and didn't want to see us anymore," Emma whispered against my shoulder. "I did move," I said, kneeling down so I could look all 3 of them in the eyes. "But I moved because I wanted a bigger place where you could visit me more often. I would never ever stop wanting to see you." "Mommy said you would watch us while she went on the boat," Lucas said, his lower lip trembling. "But your house has a different person now." "I know, sweetheart. Mommy made a mistake, but we're going to figure everything out okay." Detective Santos watched this interaction with keen interest, taking notes about the children's obvious attachment to me and their comfort level when discussing their mother's absence. When I looked up at her, she was wearing the expression of someone who had made an important decision. "Ms. Walsh, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Would you be willing to provide temporary care for Tyler, Emma, and Lucas while we investigate this situation?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I thought about my new apartment, my demanding job, the life I had just started building for myself. Then I looked at 3 small faces that trusted me to keep them safe, and I realized the answer had never really been in doubt. "Yes," I said, "whatever they need for as long as they need it." The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 8:30, giving me exactly 36 hours to transform my peaceful, one-bedroom apartment into a temporary home for 3 traumatized children. Ashley arrived Wednesday evening with 2 carloads of supplies, sleeping bags, children's clothing from various charitable donations, basic toys, and enough snack foods to feed a small army. "I can't believe Stephanie actually did this," Ashley said for the 4th time as we set up a makeshift bedroom in my living room. "I mean, I knew she was selfish, but this is beyond anything I imagined." Tyler, Emma, and Lucas had spent Tuesday night at a CPS emergency foster home, while Detective Santos expedited the paperwork for temporary kinship placement. The children had been quiet when Jennifer Murphy brought them to my apartment Wednesday afternoon, overwhelmed by another change in their rapidly shifting world. "Are we going to live here now?" Emma asked, holding her stuffed unicorn tightly against her chest as she examined the unfamiliar surroundings. "For a while," I said honestly, "until we figure out what's best for everyone." Tyler had immediately claimed responsibility for his younger siblings unpacking their few belongings and helping Lucas arrange his toys in a corner near the sliding glass doors. The 8-year-old's maturity broke my heart. No child should carry that kind of burden. My phone had been ringing constantly since Tuesday afternoon. First came the calls from the cruise ship where Captain Rodriguez was dealing with an increasingly agitated Stephanie who demanded that someone fix this mess immediately. Then came calls from my parents who had received a visit from CPS investigators and were struggling to understand how their family had reached this crisis point. "Christiana, honey, we need to talk," Mom said when I finally answered her call Wednesday evening. The children were eating dinner at my small kitchen table, and I could hear Tyler quietly reminding Emma to use her napkin. "I know, Mom, but not tonight. I have 3 exhausted kids who need stability right now." The social worker said terrible things about Stephanie. She asked us about times when the children might have been left unsupervised, about whether we'd noticed signs of neglect. It felt like an interrogation. "What did you tell her?" Mom's silence stretched long enough that I knew she was struggling with the truth she had been avoiding for years. We told her about the time Stephanie asked us to watch the children on short notice, but we explained that she's a single mother doing her best. "Mom, that's not what she asked you. She asked if the children had been left unsupervised or showed signs of neglect." Well, there were a few times when Tyler seemed more responsible than usual for his age, but children develop at different rates. I closed my eyes, recognizing the same pattern of justification and excuse-making that had enabled Stephanie's behavior for years. My parents were loving grandparents, but they had never learned to distinguish between supporting their daughter and protecting their grandchildren. "I have to go," I said. "We'll talk more after the custody hearing." Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly unusual weather for Phoenix in March. I dressed in my most conservative business suit and helped the children get ready for what Jennifer Murphy had explained would be a brief court appearance where a judge would determine temporary custody arrangements. The family court building was a modern structure of glass and steel that somehow managed to feel both imposing and welcoming. Tyler held Emma's hand while Lucas clutched my fingers as we walked through the metal detectors and found our way to the assigned courtroom. Detective Santos was waiting in the hallway looking professional in a charcoal gray suit and carrying a thick folder of documentation. She had spent the past 2 days conducting a thorough investigation that painted a disturbing picture of Stephanie's parenting. "How are you holding up?" she asked as we sat down on a bench outside the courtroom. "Nervous," I admitted. "I keep thinking about how unprepared I am for this. I don't know anything about raising children, and my apartment isn't set up for 3 kids. "Ms. Walsh, I've seen a lot of emergency placements in my career. What matters most isn't having the perfect setup. It's having someone who puts the children's needs first. Those kids have been more relaxed and secure in the past 2 days than they probably have in months." The courtroom door opened and a bailiff called our case number. Judge Patricia Hernandez was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had clearly reviewed all the documentation before our arrival because she got straight to the essential questions. "Ms. Walsh," she said, addressing me directly, "you're seeking temporary custody of your sister's 3 minor children under emergency circumstances. Detective Santos, please summarize the situation that brought us here." For the next 15 minutes, Detective Santos presented her findings in clear professional language that somehow made Stephanie's actions sound even worse than they had felt when I lived through them. The judge took notes as she heard about the taxi delivery, the previous CPS reports that had been dismissed due to family intervention, and the pattern of abandonment that had been disguised as normal childcare arrangements. "Have there been any communications from the children's mother since Tuesday?" Judge Hernandez asked. Detective Santos consulted her notes. "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Stephanie Walsh has sent multiple messages from the cruise ship, alternating between demands that the children be returned to family members and threats of legal action against various parties. She has shown no concern for the children's emotional welfare or acknowledgement that her actions constituted abandonment." "Has she indicated any intention to return early from her vacation to address this situation?" "No, Your Honor. When contacted by ship personnel, she stated that her vacation was non-refundable and that other people needed to step up and handle their family responsibilities." Judge Hernandez looked down at Tyler, Emma, and Lucas, who were sitting quietly in the first row behind our table. Tyler was holding both his siblings' hands, his young face serious and worried. "Children, I know this is scary and confusing," she said gently. "You're not in trouble, and none of this is your fault. We're just trying to make sure you're safe and cared for while the adults work out some problems." Tyler raised his hand tentatively. "Your Honor, are we going to be able to stay with Aunt Christiana? We like her house, and she makes good pancakes." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Judge Hernandez smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we're discussing, Tyler. Ms. Walsh, before I make this order official, I need to confirm that you understand what you're taking on. Temporary kinship custody means you're responsible for these children's daily care medical needs, educational requirements, and emotional support. This arrangement could last weeks or months depending on the outcome of our investigation." "I understand, Your Honor. These children are my family and I want to provide them with the stability they deserve." Detective Santos, what is your recommendation regarding permanent custody arrangements? "Based on my investigation, I recommend that the children remain in Ms. Christiana Walsh's care while we conduct a full assessment of their mother's fitness as a parent. I also recommend that Ms. Stephanie Walsh be required to complete parenting classes, psychological evaluation, and supervised visitation before any custody modifications are considered." Judge Hernandez made several notes before looking up at me again. "Ms. Walsh, I'm granting you temporary emergency custody of Tyler, Emma, and Lucas Walsh, effective immediately. Child Protective Services will conduct home visits and provide support services as needed. We'll reconvene in 30 days to review the situation." As we walked out of the courtroom, Tyler looked up at me with an expression far too mature for his 8 years. "Aunt Christiana, does this mean we're really going to live with you now?" "For now, yes. Is that okay with you?" "It's better than okay," he said, squeezing my hand. "It feels like home." I didn't realize until later that afternoon when I was helping Emma unpack her school backpack in our new routine that I felt the same way. For the first time in my adult life, taking care of other people didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. The first month of temporary custody passed in a whirlwind of school schedules, doctor's appointments, and CPS home visits that gradually transformed from inspections into support sessions. Jennifer Murphy became a regular presence in our lives, bringing resources for trauma counseling and helping me navigate the complex world of emergency guardianship paperwork. Tyler, Emma, and Lucas adapted to our new routine with a resilience that broke my heart and filled me with admiration. Tyler threw himself into his homework with new intensity as if good grades could guarantee the stability he had never experienced. Emma began sleeping through the night without the nightmares that had plagued her first week at my apartment. Lucas started speaking in complete sentences again, instead of the fragmented words he had used when he first arrived. The most significant change was in their relationship with each other. Tyler gradually stopped acting like a miniature parent, allowing himself to be a child, while I handled the adult responsibilities. Emma became more confident and outgoing, no longer constantly checking to make sure the adults around her were happy. Lucas simply bloomed, laughing, playing, and exploring his environment with the fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old who felt secure. My parents struggled with the new reality more than the children did. They visited twice a week, bringing groceries and toys, but I could see the guilt and confusion in their eyes as they watched Tyler, Emma, and Lucas thrive under consistent care. "They seem so different," Mom said during their third visit, watching Emma teach Lucas a clapping game on the living room floor. "More relaxed, I guess. They're not worried about when the next disruption is coming." I explained, folding tiny clothes that I was still learning to sort by size. Kids need predictability. Dad sat in my new armchair reading a story to Lucas while Tyler and Emma worked on a puzzle nearby. For the first time since I could remember, he looked peaceful, rather than tense. "I keep thinking about all the signs we missed," he said quietly. "Or maybe we didn't miss them. Maybe we just didn't want to see them." "You were trying to help Stephanie," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that." "But we enabled her instead," Mom said, her voice heavy with regret. "Every time we stepped in to take care of the children when she couldn't, we made it easier for her to avoid being a real parent." The truth in that statement hung in the air between us. My parents had spent 8 years believing they were supporting a struggling single mother, but instead, they had been protecting an irresponsible adult from the natural consequences of her choices. Stephanie's communications from the cruise ship had evolved from angry demands to manipulative pleading to threats of legal action. The cruise ended after 7 days, but she extended her stay in Florida for another week, claiming she needed time to process the betrayal of her family. When she finally returned to Phoenix, she immediately violated the court order requiring supervised visitation by showing up at my old apartment complex, apparently assuming I had moved back. Maria Santos, who still lived there, called the police when Stephanie began pounding on the door and screaming about her stolen children. The incident resulted in a formal warning and a more restrictive custody order that required all visitation to take place at the CPS office with a social worker present. Stephanie's first supervised visit was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after her return. I brought Tyler, Emma, and Lucas to the CPS building with mixed emotions. Despite everything that had happened, they missed their mother and deserved the chance to maintain a relationship with her. But I was also terrified that seeing Stephanie would undo the progress they had made in healing from their trauma. The visitation room was designed to be comfortable and non-threatening with soft furniture, children's books, and toys, arranged to encourage natural interaction. Stephanie was waiting when we arrived, wearing a sundress and designer sandals that looked more appropriate for a beach vacation than a child welfare office. "My babies!" she exclaimed, opening her arms wide. Tyler approached cautiously and accepted a hug, but Emma hung back near my side and Lucas hid completely behind my legs. "Why don't you want to hug Mommy?" Stephanie asked Emma, her voice already carrying an edge of hurt and accusation. "Did someone tell you not to love me anymore?" Jennifer Murphy, who was supervising the visit, gently intervened. "Children sometimes need time to readjust after separations. Why don't you sit down and tell them about your trip?" For the next hour, I watched from an observation room as Stephanie alternated between showering the children with attention and expressing frustration when they didn't respond the way she expected. She had brought expensive toys from Florida, but seemed annoyed when Tyler asked practical questions about when he could go back to school and whether she had found a new place to live. "School isn't important right now," she said dismissively. "We need to focus on getting our family back together." "But I like my school," Tyler said quietly, "and I don't want to miss more days." Stephanie's expression darkened. "You like living with Aunt Christiana more than with me." The question hung in the air like a trap. Tyler looked helplessly toward the observation window where he knew I was watching, and I could see him struggling with loyalty to both of us. Jennifer Murphy stepped in again. Tyler, you don't have to choose between loving different people. This is a confusing time, and it's okay to have complicated feelings. But Stephanie had already interpreted Tyler's hesitation as rejection. She stood up abruptly, her voice rising to the level that had always signaled an impending tantrum. "I can't believe you've poisoned them against me," she said, pointing toward the observation window. "I'm their mother. I gave birth to them, I raised them, and now you've turned them into strangers." Emma started crying, and Lucas ran to Tyler, who put his arms around both his siblings with a protective instinct that no 8-year-old should have needed to develop. "Ms. Walsh," Jennifer said firmly, "I need you to lower your voice and focus on the children. They're upset because you're upset." "They're upset because their aunt has stolen them from me," Stephanie shouted. "This entire situation is ridiculous. I went on one vacation and suddenly I'm being treated like a criminal." The visit ended 15 minutes early when Stephanie stormed out, declaring that she wouldn't return until this whole charade was resolved in her favor. Tyler, Emma, and Lucas were quiet during the car ride home, processing what they had witnessed. That night, as I tucked them into their makeshift beds in the living room, Emma asked the question I had been dreading. "Aunt Christiana, why is Mommy so angry all the time?" I sat down on the edge of her sleeping bag, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, when adults are scared or sad, they don't know how to talk about their feelings in a healthy way. Your mom loves you, but she's having a hard time right now. "Is it our fault?" Tyler asked from his corner near the window. "No," I said firmly. "None of this is your fault. Adults are responsible for solving adult problems, and children are responsible for being children. Your job is to be safe, learn new things, and grow up happy. That's it." Lucas sat up in his sleeping bag, clutching his elephant. "Are we going to have to go back to being scared all the time?" The question broke my heart because it revealed how much anxiety these children had been carrying before they came to live with me. "No, sweetheart, nobody is going to make you feel scared if I can help it." As I turned off the lights and listened to their breathing slow into sleep, I realized that fighting for their custody wasn't just about protecting them from Stephanie's neglect. It was about giving them the chance to discover who they could become when they weren't constantly worried about adult chaos. 3 months after the emergency custody hearing, Judge Hernandez reconvened our case for a permanent custody determination. The courtroom looked the same, but everything else had changed. Tyler, Emma, and Lucas sat in the front row wearing clean, well-fitting clothes, their faces bright and confident in ways that previous photographs in their CPS file showed they had never been before. Detective Santos presented her final report with the thoroughness of someone who understood that the next few minutes would determine the trajectory of 3 young lives. "Your Honor, our investigation has revealed a consistent pattern of neglect, abandonment, and emotional manipulation by Ms. Stephanie Walsh. During the period when the children have been in Ms. Christiana Walsh's care, they have shown remarkable improvement in emotional stability, academic performance, and social development." The evidence was overwhelming. Stephanie had missed 4 out of 6 scheduled supervised visits, each time blaming external circumstances rather than taking responsibility for her choices. When she did appear, she spent the time complaining about the custody arrangement rather than focusing on her children's needs. She had completed only 2 of the required 8 parenting classes and had failed to schedule the psychological evaluation that was mandated by the court. Most damaging to her case was the recorded conversation from her 3rd visit when she told Tyler that he was selfish and ungrateful for asking when she would find a stable place to live. Jennifer Murphy had documented Tyler's regression. After that visit, nightmares returned. His grades dropped, and he started asking repeatedly if he had done something wrong. In contrast, the children's progress under my care was remarkable. Tyler's teacher submitted a letter describing his transformation from an anxious, distracted student to an engaged learner who participated actively in class discussions. Emma's preschool teacher reported that she had developed friendships for the first time and was showing age-appropriate creativity and curiosity. Lucas was hitting all his developmental milestones and speaking in complete sentences with expanding vocabulary. Ms. Christiana Walsh. Judge Hernandez said, "Over the past 3 months, you've demonstrated exceptional commitment to these children's welfare. You've attended every school meeting, every medical appointment, and every family therapy session. You've provided stability, structure, and emotional support that has allowed them to flourish." I felt Tyler reach over and squeeze my hand as the judge continued. However, I want to be very clear about what permanent custody means. You're not just signing up to provide temporary care, you're making a lifelong commitment to raise these children as if they were your own. You'll be responsible for their education, their health, their emotional development, and their preparation for adulthood. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I looked at Tyler, who was sitting up straight with his shoulders back, trying to look older than his 8 years. I looked at Emma, who was quietly coloring in a notebook, but listening to every word. I looked at Lucas, who was playing with a small toy car, but glanced up at me with complete trust in his eyes. "Yes, Your Honor, I can't imagine my life without them anymore." Judge Hernandez made notes in her file before delivering her decision. "I hereby award permanent custody of Tyler Emma and Lucas Walsh to Ms. Christiana Walsh, effective immediately. Ms. Stephanie Walsh will be granted supervised visitation twice monthly contingent on her completion of court-mandated parenting programs and psychological evaluation." The courtroom was quiet except for the sound of Emma's crayon moving across her paper. Then Tyler whispered, "Does that mean we get to stay forever?" "It means you're home," I whispered back. The legal aftermath took several more weeks to resolve. Stephanie contested the decision, hired a lawyer she couldn't afford, and made various threats about appealing to higher courts. But her attorney quickly realized that her case was hopeless. No judge would return children to a mother who had abandoned them and then failed to demonstrate any meaningful change during a 3-month evaluation period. My parents struggled with the reality of their daughter's failures as a mother, but they eventually channeled their energy into being the best grandparents they could be. Dad started coming over every Saturday to help Tyler with woodworking projects in the apartment complex's community workshop. Mom taught Emma to bake cookies and helped me navigate the complexities of planning birthday parties and play dates. Ashley became the best honorary aunt anyone could ask for bringing her paralegal skills to help me understand educational rights and legal documentation, while also providing the emotional support I needed during the hardest moments of adjustment. Most surprisingly, Detective Maria Santos became a genuine friend. We discovered that we had similar tastes in books and coffee shops, and she often stopped by on weekends to check on the children's progress. Having a police detective as a family friend turned out to be remarkably reassuring when dealing with Stephanie's occasional attempts to circumvent the custody order. 6 months after permanent custody was granted, Tyler asked if he could call me Mom instead of Aunt Christiana. The question caught me completely off guard. I was making dinner while helping Emma with homework and mediating a dispute between her and Lucas about toy ownership. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," I said, kneeling down to look at him directly. "But Tyler, you already have a mom. I don't want you to feel like you have to choose." He was quiet for a moment, considering this with the seriousness that had become his trademark. "I know Stephanie is my mom because she gave birth to me. But you're my mom because you take care of me. Can't I have both?" Emma looked up from her homework. "I want to call you Mom too. Is that okay?" Lucas, who was 4 and had been living with me longer than he had clear memories of living anywhere else, had already been calling me Mama Christiana for weeks without anyone making a conscious decision about it. "If that's what you want," I said, feeling my eyes fill with tears, "then I would be honored." That night, after I had tucked all 3 of them into their proper beds in their properly arranged bedrooms, we had moved to a larger apartment once the custody became permanent. I sat in my living room reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. 18 months earlier, I had been a single woman with a demanding job, a complicated family, and no idea how to balance my own needs with the endless demands of people who didn't respect my boundaries. I had thought that saying no to babysitting was about protecting my career and preserving my sanity. I never could have imagined that setting that boundary would save 3 children from a lifetime of instability and neglect. I never could have predicted that the sister who tried to manipulate me into submission would ultimately give me the greatest gift possible, the chance to become the mother I never knew I wanted to be. Stephanie still lives in Phoenix, working intermittent jobs and dating men who don't last long enough to meet her children. She sees Tyler, Emma, and Lucas twice a month in supervised visits that have gradually become less traumatic as the children have learned to adjust their expectations. She tells anyone who will listen that she was railroaded by the system and that her children were stolen from her, but she has never acknowledged the role her own choices played in creating the crisis. My parents have become the grandparents they always had the potential to be, providing love and support without the enabling behaviors that once protected Stephanie from consequences. Dad has taught Tyler to fish and build model airplanes. Mom has started a college fund for all 3 children and takes Emma shopping for school clothes every fall. Tyler is now 11 years old and wants to be an engineer when he grows up. Emma is 9 and has decided she wants to be a veterinarian, who also writes children's books. Lucas is 7 and changes his career aspirations daily, but currently wants to be a policeman who catches bad guys and also makes pizza. They're all honor roll students who participate in after-school activities, play sports, and have friends over for sleepovers. They're growing into confident, curious, compassionate young people who understand that they're loved unconditionally and that they can trust the adults in their lives to keep them safe. The most important lesson I've learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when that person is family. Every time my parents and I had covered for Stephanie's irresponsibility, we had made it easier for her to continue neglecting her children. It took a crisis to force all of us to confront the truth we had been avoiding. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's well-being. When I said no to babysitting without notice, I wasn't abandoning Tyler, Emma, and Lucas. I was creating the space that eventually allowed me to provide them with the stability they deserved. Children need adults who put their needs first, not adults who prioritize keeping peace with other adults. They need consistency, predictability, and the security of knowing that someone will always be there to protect them, even when that protection requires difficult choices. Today, as I watch Tyler help Lucas with his math homework while Emma practices piano in the next room, I know that saying no to Stephanie was the first step in saying yes to the life we were all meant to have. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I questioned everything about my choices. But love isn't about making people comfortable. It's about creating the conditions where they can grow into their best selves. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to participate in their dysfunction. And sometimes the person who benefits most from that gift isn't the person you thought you were trying to help. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping peace with a family member and doing what was right for innocent people caught in the middle? How do you balance loyalty to family with protecting those who can't protect themselves? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to hear more about the importance of healthy boundaries in family relationships. Don't forget to share this story with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to say no when saying yes would enable harm. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes.